Hi, welcome back to Therapy Designs. If you're new to this channel, my name is Kelly and this channel is all about print on demand everything. So if you would like to learn about print on demand, please hit like and subscribe and stick around. So in today's video, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I am going to show you kind of how designs that we made on Canva look once they're actually printed. And so first I have to say that the shirts that I'm going to show you were printed using Printful, and they are a direct-to-garment print. So just so you're aware of that. So I'm going to show you different textures, photos, glitter masks, splatters, transparencies, sketches, and show you what they really look like when they're printed and whether or not they will print good or whether you should just forget them. So we're going to go ahead and start with some textures. So this is a graphic that I did show you guys how to make in one of my videos. If you didn't see that video, you can go ahead and search for it. It was about layering textures. And so we made this dinosaur design. So you can see the design on the right, and then the picture of the shirt is on the left showing you how it printed. Now it will look good. I like this shirt. I think it printed nicely. Everything kind of goes nice, but a point that you do have to make, it is going to print lighter and usually with less contrast than what you'll see on your screen. So if you want stuff to really pop, if you want to, really have it look good, you almost need to pump up the saturation, pump up the contrast and all of that in your design so that when it prints, it is going to get muted a little bit. And so you should be aware of that. But overall, I do think that the textures and graphics printed pretty well. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in so you guys can see, what level of detail it will print on. Okay, so here it is zoomed in a little bit. And so you can see, yes, the color is going to be a little bit different. Obviously, it's lighter. It's kind of got a different shade to it. But otherwise, it actually does look pretty nice. It's got enough detail in a print that, people are going to be happy with it. And so, when you're doing designs, just be aware it's not going to be super detailed in the print, but it's going to be detailed enough that you can get away with it and that this would look good printed on a t-shirt or any kind of, fabric print. And so that is what I wanted to say about layering textures and graphics. Next, we are going to talk about photos. So I've had people ask, how do photos print? And photos print the same way graphics do, and pretty much the same rules apply. It's not going to print as sharp. It's not going to have the contrast. It's not going to be as saturated or as vivid, but it is still going to look good. So this is another design that I showed you guys how to do in a video. So again, if you didn't see that video and you're curious, go ahead and look for it. There is a photo frame video somewhere in there that you can find on my channel. But this is the tiger eye design, and you can see it printed more or less the same, just it's not going to be quite as dark. It's not going to be quite as contrasty. You also have to realize that the photo, is also not the best quality. I just kind of threw the shirt on my dining room table and took a picture. So that is what it looks like. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on this one too so you guys can see. Okay, so there it is, zoomed in a little bit more. Again, it looks good, happy with the print. And what you got to realize is most people aren't going to have the side-by-side comparison. Obviously, looking side by side, you can tell the print does not look as nice as the photo. So obviously, most people aren't going to be able to do the side-by-side comparison. They'll see the shirt in a small thumbnail, they'll get it, and it's not as though they're going to now hold it up to an enlarged version of your original design and be like, oh, look, it's not quite as vivid or it's not quite as contrasty or whatnot. So looking at it just as it is and not comparing it to the original graphic, it does still look like a good print, and I do think that it is totally okay to print photos on t-shirts or anything else. Obviously, printing on non-fabric is going to look different. So if we're looking at stickers or paper prints, they're going to be a little bit more sharp, a little bit more vivid, a little bit more like what you would see on the right side. But it does still print pretty good on fabric, so I would say go for it. I'm in favor of photo printing. The next section is glitter masks, and I have gotten a lot of questions on how glitter masks print, and I have done a lot of videos using glitter masks in the past. And again, if you haven't seen those, go ahead and look back to my channel. There's a whole bunch of different designs that I've used glitter masks on. Not a big surprise when you print a glitter mask, it's not printing glitter. You're not actually going to have that sparkling glitter. What you'll get is the illusion of glitter. So what you'll get is colors, a bunch of little dots, and it'll be like gold dots and white dots to give sort of a textured look. And it does give a little bit of an illusion of glitter, and it looks nice. But if a customer is expecting glitter, they're going to be disappointed. So just be sure that you do not include in any of your title tags or anything like that the word glitter. So you don't want to, you know, verbally mislead them in any way. So it's not actually going to be glitter, but it will still give that sparkling look. And so I do like this. This is a shirt that I have myself and that I really like. I'll go ahead and zoom in so you can see it. So here I am zoomed in pretty tight. This is a pretty small print. It's just like a little corner pocket print. So I had to zoom in pretty tight to see it. But you can see it's not going to be quite the same color. It's going to have a little bit more of a yellow tone versus on the right is more of a browner tone. Oops, sale. But it does look good. And again, I have this shirt. I wear it all the time. I like it as long as you're not misleading the customers and using the words glitter. A glitter mask does still look good. Try to think of it more as just like a texture mask or like putting a grunge filter on it. It's gonna give texture, it's gonna give it the illusion of sparkle, but no, it will not actually be sparkly. Does it print nice? Yes. If I was not looking at the picture on the right and I was just looking at the picture on the left, it would look good. And again, typically when somebody buys something, they don't have a digital version side by side comparing it the way that I'm doing right now. So if I was to zoom in, so here I am zoomed in really tight. So without the comparison version, if you just got a shirt like this, you can see slightly different shades of sort of a yellow and a white dotted textury look. It still prints nice, it still looks good, and without the side-by-side comparison, I would still say that this is a nice design and a nice print. This one you can see is a little bit worn. I've had this shirt for a while, and so after a few washes, you can see it's kind of a little bit coming off around like the bottoms and the sides. But when it was an original print, you know, right when I got it, it was all still pretty sharp and looked nice. And so that's all I wanted to say about the glitter prints. And sorry, my dog is being really bad this morning and will not shut up. So if you keep hearing a lot of little like whimpering noises in the back, that is him. So ignore that. Okay, next we're going to talk about splatter frames. By the way, this is the dog that won't be quiet, so be a good boy and stop barking. So splatter frames, again, I've done a lot of videos using splatter frames, and if you haven't seen those, good, check out my channel, and I'm sure you'll see several different videos on how to do splatter frames or how to use splatter frames. Splatter frames are a convenient way to sort of get that blurred edge look where it kind of fades out, but without getting, without using transparency, which is what we're going to talk about next. So the splatter frames are great. They give a good kind of splattery grunge edge, but everything's still really sharp. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on this one so that you can see. I know I'm getting a little glare off the picture there, so it doesn't look quite as nice. So give me 1 second. So here I am zoomed in, and so we can kind of see how the edges look, having the little splatter. Now what you'll notice again with all of them is that you don't have quite the detail that you have here. So over here you can see a lot of small detail, a lot of really subtle changes in gradients and colors. Over here, it's a little bit more flat, a little bit more washed out, and you're not quite getting the level of detail. Now, part of that is because this was a bad picture. I've got kind of a glare from a light shining on it, so this picture isn't the best. But again, nobody's going to be looking at these side by side. They're just going to be looking at the print and whether or not it's printed nice. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on this print real quick. Okay, so zooming in on this print, I'm kind of just at the top centered. You can see the way that the splatter looks, and it actually looks pretty nice. These are all kind of just little dots that splatter out. And so it actually does print pretty nice. And you can see some of the details in here. I still can see some of the lines from the basketball that I put on here and some of the kind of stuff from the planet on this basketball. So you do still get a little bit of detail, just not quite the level of detail that you're going to get on your screen. And so that is something to be aware of. But in terms of just the look of splatter edges do print good. I do recommend them. They are, you know, widely used. And so it is definitely something that you can incorporate. And again, I've got a lot of videos on how to do splatter edges. Here's the one that gets the most questions or the most concerns, is transparency. How will transparency print on a shirt or on fabric? And so again, this is another design that we went over not that long ago for sharks, and there was a splatter of blue in the background, but some of that splatter did in fact have transparency around the edges. And so as we can see here, this does not quite look the same as this, and the reason for that is the transparency. So what it will do when you've got transparent elements is it will print it over white ink. So if this was on a white shirt, it may not look as bad, but when we go and put it on a black shirt, you're going to get like little white outlines around all of those transparent things, giving it this overall whitish look, because all of these are just little white outlines. And so that is how the transparency looks. So again, with this design, I tried to say, hey, pick things that don't have transparency, try to keep it a little bit more splattered. But I did go ahead and use one that had transparency, and you can see how that looks right now. I'm gonna go ahead and zoom in real tight so you can see. Okay, so zoomed in just on the shirt right here. What we can see, again, it's not going to have the level of contrast, the level of saturation. It's always a good idea with your graphics to go ahead and make them extra saturated or extra contrasty, knowing that they're going to print a little bit more muted. So, you know, kind of like stage makeup, you got to put a lot of makeup on because the camera's going to kind of flatten it out. You kind of got to really extra saturate and extra contrast your designs, because when they print, they are going to print a little bit more flat. That said, ignoring the sharks, we're just looking at the splatter. What we can see is little white outlines almost surrounding all of the areas of blue, especially, you know, in through the middle, you see the blue, but then it's just white outlines everywhere. And all of that white is due to having transparency. So where on the screen, that just looked like a dark blue fading into the black background that I had on a shirt, it is going to look like white. And so if this was on a white t-shirt, it might not be as big of a deal. If it was on a white or just light colored t-shirt, it would probably blend in a little bit more. But when we put this on a dark t-shirt, all of that white really pops, okay? So it depends what look you're going for. So if you ask, is it okay to use transparency? As long as you know how it's gonna print and you've taken that into consideration, people do use transparency. Some people do go for this kind of look here. And again, if this was on a lighter color shirt, you might say, oh, it blends nicely and you're okay with it. But it is going to look different on your screen than what you get when you, you know, when you sell it. So if somebody was looking at a thumbnail and they were looking at a thumbnail of the graphic, and then they got this print, this looks, you know, very much different. So even if you liked the way that this looked, it's not going to be what they were expecting. So you got to kind of take that into consideration if you decide to use transparency. You just have to know how it works. Now, part of what makes this messy is that I had itty bitty little splatters with transparency all around them. So it created all of these little white spots. If you were to use something that was maybe a big image and it was just transparent around the edge, like a border, you would get a little thin white line around the whole thing, and it probably wouldn't be as big of a deal. But when we use splatter with transparency in it, you're going to get all this white everywhere. And so that is, again, something to consider. I mean, some of these look kind of cool. The way the circle is and all of that looks kind of cool. It's definitely interesting and different. It's just not what you would have expected when you looked at the overall graphic. Which, again, zooming out for, you know, comparison, you can see when I'm looking at this graphic, this is all really dark, right? And so it looks, there's no white in this at all. And when we look at this, there's a lot of white in this. And so that is the main difference. If I was to go ahead and change my background color here, I'm just going to change it to white. Okay, so now we can see the design on a white background. We can see the transparency a little bit more, but you know, there's a lot more white. This might be more of how it would look on a white t-shirt, because again, there would be white surrounding all of these blue areas, but on a white t-shirt, it would blend in a lot better. And so this is more of an accurate representation than it would look on a dark shirt. So just be aware, you know, so my rule on transparency is be aware if you're going to use it for a specific look or a specific, you know, style that you're going for, that's fine. Just make sure it works on the shirt and make sure that you're using a thumbnail that accurately depicts what it's going to look like. Otherwise, if you're going for a splattered look like here, and you don't want all that white, try to use solid splatters. Try to avoid transparency if you can, or use it very, very sparingly. And so that's just my general rule on transparency. If you can avoid it, or if you can use it sparingly, unless you're doing it for a very specific artistic purpose. Okay, and lastly, I wanted to talk about sort of sketches. And this design uses a sketch of, you know, a buffalo, but then there's also a lot of more vector type images. Now, when we're talking about text and sort of just the general shapes and lines, those are always going to come out really nice and sharp and crisp. Okay, so if you're just doing a solid text work design, solid lines, it's going to print really nice. Okay, so we don't even have to worry about that. So on this design, I'm specifically looking more at the buffalo here. So obviously we can see it's printed a lot darker than what you see here, but it still looks nice. So can you use sketches? Again, yes, just be aware it's not going to look quite the same when it's printed. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in so you can see the difference in the buffalo. The rest of it looks pretty much the same. Okay, so zooming in a little bit tighter so that we can see our buffalo here, I see a lot more free space, right? So these are very, very fine lines and you're able to see the black background through them. Well, it's not going to print quite that fine, you know. When it's printing, the lines are going to be thicker. So if you got a lot of really, really thin lines, it's going to come out looking a lot more solid like it does here. So here, that buffalo is looking a lot more solid because these lines are a lot thicker and it doesn't leave the space in between for the background to show through. I mean, you can also see here, these lines, they're going to look a lot brighter and thicker when you print them. But does it look good? Yeah, again, I think that it looks fine, and as long as you're aware of that you're going to get more of the silhouette look than the sketch look, it's perfectly fine to print. You just sometimes have to be cautious of your thumbnails, and you don't want to necessarily misrepresent what it is that it's going to look like when it's printed. But does it look good? Yeah. Do I sell this shirt? Definitely. You know, my son has this shirt. This is actually a picture of my son's shirt. And so it looks really nice. It just doesn't look quite the same as it does on your screen. The rest of it looks identical. So the lines are all going to be nice and sharp and crisp and all of that. So whenever we're just doing line work, that's all going to look really nice. It's just the sketch that's going to kind of not look the same. By the way, this is sort of a vintage style line design. I do again have a video on how to do line designs like this. So if you're curious, again, go to my channel and go ahead and just sort of scroll through the videos. I have something like 150 videos up. So there's a good chance that if you're looking for something specific, it may already be there if you go ahead and look for it. So again, if you want to learn how to do any of the designs that I showed in this video, I do have videos on how to do pretty much all of them. And so that is all I really wanted to talk about for today. So just to recap, textures look good, photos look good, clipping masks look good. Pretty much everything looks good with the exception of the transparency. That's the one I would avoid if at all possible, unless I'm making a very specific artistic decision. The rest of them all look good, and the only thing that you need to really recognize is that it's not going to be quite as detailed on a print on a shirt as it's going to be on your screen, and it's going to look a little bit flatter, a little bit less saturated. It's going to be a little bit lighter. You know, you're not going to have the contrast that you're going to have on your screen. So again, you can try to overcompensate for that, make your designs a little bit more contrasty, a little bit more saturated and whatnot. But they print good, they look nice, and again, the people buying them are not going to be doing the side-by-side comparison the way that we did here. The people buying them are just going to get the shirt and say, does it look good? Yes, okay, then they're happy. So that is what I wanted to say about how prints really look. And again, these are direct to garment printing styles. So this is not sublimation. So, you know, you might get different results there. So just be aware of that. If you have any other questions or comments, drop it in the comments section below. I'll try to get back to you as quickly as I can. I hope you guys are doing well with all of your sales, staying creative, and kind of expanding both your knowledge and your, you know, artistic portfolio and the things that you're doing. So again, I hope to see you guys next week. That's all for today's video. If you found that useful and would like to see more videos with helpful tips and tricks, be sure to hit like and subscribe and turn on your notifications so you don't miss any of the weekly videos. As always, keep growing and stay creative, and we'll see you next time.